Welcome to the College Knowledge Podcast, sponsored by the College Planning Network and Paradigm Financial Group. Whether you're searching for that right fit college, applying to college, or figuring out how you're going to afford it all, you're in the right place. You'll hear from deans, admissions counselors, student athletes, and scholars from esteemed universities and colleges around the country. We'll dig deep to uncover their insight and unique experiences. So whether you're a student gearing up for college or a parent with college-bound kids, sit back, relax, and listen. Like you, we have lots of questions. Our guests have the answers, and we're excited to share them with you. Let's get started. We can send your student to the school of their dreams and send you to your dream retirement. Visit us at elitecollegiateplanning.com to get started.
Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of College Knowledge. I'm your host today, Mr. Joe Kearns. I am extremely excited about today because I personally have a lot of questions. It is something that I am not have a wealth of knowledge in this area, and that's why we love doing podcasts like this, because I get to learn. So when I have lots of questions and I'm willing to learn, I hope that you as a listener are as well. Today, we have retired U.S. Army Lieutenant Colonel Rob Kirkland to join us. And Rob, I believe we're going to be talking a lot about ROTC today, which I cannot wait to get into. Thank you for being on the show. But honestly, I want to know a little bit about your backstory. Tell me how you kind of got into this role. What was your journey? And kind of let's start there and see, I'm sure there's going to be a lot of questions I'm going to have. But how did you get to where you are today?
Yeah, great. Well, it's great to be on the show today. I am a graduate of West Point and served in the Army for 26 years, including a stint as an instructor in the Department of History at West Point. But later on in my career, before I retired, I was the head of Army ROTC, first at Claremont McKenna College in Claremont, and then I took a year break and deployed, and then I came back and served my final 3 years on active duty as a head of ROTC at University of Southern California. So that gave me an opportunity later in my career kind of to see a different way that officers are made in the armed services, or at least in the Army. Earlier in my career, obviously it was West Point, the military academy, and then later at a college or university. So the way that I sort of came to what I do today is I retired in the Army in 2013. And as part of the ROTC scholarship process, a candidate who is a senior in high school who's interested in obtaining a scholarship in order to be able to use that at a college or university to train to become an officer has to do an interview with a professor of military sciences, which I was, or they have to interview at an ROTC program. And I found that a lot of the candidates who came to me were not prepared for that interview. It's a different application process and interview process, as you can imagine, from, say, a college interview process. Yeah. And so obviously I thought that there was a deficit in knowledge out there. And so after I retired, I sort of set up a consulting practice that helps candidates who are interested in the scholarship kind of navigate that process successfully. So I've been at that for about the last 10 years. And then over the last 5 years, I've also expanded my consulting to include service academies, Air Force Academy, West Point, Naval Academy. But today, I think we're going to be talking about what I do with ROTC. And so I started with Army ROTC, and I expanded to Air Force, Navy, and Marine Corps simply because the people who reached out to me were interested in that and interested in all the services, not just Army.
That is fantastic, unbelievable. Always a great story that I love to hear. People seeing that there is a deficit in an area and just wanting to help and taking your knowledge and driving with it. It's a phenomenal story. I want to backtrack. I mean, I'm sure we're going to talk a lot about ROTC, but specifically, I wanted to get into the idea that some of these students were not interviewing well. And what were you seeing? Was there a common theme that needed the improvement? Was it just they weren't prepared? What was, and I know you said that a college interview can be very different. So to ask, number one, what are some of those differences? And two, what were you seeing that students weren't prepared with that really needed help with?
Sure. So a lot of the students that we're interviewing didn't have a lot of knowledge about the military, interestingly. They had, their parents were oftentimes did not have a military background.
Okay.
It was oftentimes the grandparents of the students that influenced them to apply for a scholarship, because, that was back in the draft or back when, most people served in the military. So the grandparents, grandfather mostly, was the one that would influence the student to apply for the scholarship. And so there was just kind of like not really that much of a knowledge about the military in general. So the students would go into the interview with, very, very basic knowledge about the military. And so, the way to think of this scholarship interview would be sort of like a job interview, as if you were viewing with, Jeff Bezos at Amazon, and the person asks you, why do you want to join Amazon? And your answer is, well, because it has cool, I order cool things from it.
I use it all the time.
Or, the typical boilerplate response you would get would be, I want to serve my country, which is, a great answer. But, obviously you're competing for a scholarship that, that is very valuable. So you obviously want to be able to know more about, the service that you're going into than just, that you want to just serve in the military. I would say the second thing is the value set and the emphasis of the military. So the military, as you probably know, is a team sport. It's one of these, it's nothing gets done in the military by yourself. You're always part of a team. You're always, for lack of a better term, the way it would be called would be like a selfless servant, someone who puts the values and the interests of their people that they serve over themselves. There's I think a book out that's called Leaders Eat Last. I forgot what the name of the author is for that book, but that kind of encapsulates kind of the way that the military looks at things. And so oftentimes what you'd see is students would come in and talk about themselves the whole time, about what they did in high school, about all the things that they've accomplished. And that may resonate well with, say, a college interview, but, the military is interested in how you led others in a project or goal, how you were an honorable person, how you were a selfless servant, how you were a good teammate. And so the tone of the interview is much different than, say, a regular, say, college interview. So I would say those two things would be the biggest two things, would be the knowledge of the military, and then the tone of your interview and being more of kind of a selfless servant, teammate kind of ethos.
Love it. Immediately when you were discussing that, I was thinking job interview. That's exactly what was going through my head. And because that's honestly, even from the college interview standpoint, that's kind of the advice that I give to parents to pass down to the students, is you have to show interest in the school. You have to be knowledgeable about their history, why you might think it is a good fit. You've done your research and you speak to it. But one of the things that I've told parents about the college interview, I'm curious if it's the same with the military, is to also go in there and ask questions to make sure that it's the right fit for you, right? If I go into a job and all I do, and you mentioned like the schools, they might want to hear you just talk about yourself. But I also tell people it's also about not just in a true job interview is not trying to show that you're a good applicant, but also that job that you're in, they're also trying to get you. They have to convince you that this is the right place to be. So I always say the power of your questions in an interview can be extremely, not just a great resource, but also show your interest versus the person that just talks about themselves. Would that hold true? Is it the same? Like, hey, I'm very interested in this, but I want to know, is this the right branch for me? Why would this be? Are those good questions to ask, or would that kind of push somebody off?
I think that might be what I recommend to candidates, and when I work with candidates, I recommend a pre-visit before their interview. So what I recommend is, for example, If they know they're going to do their interview in October, which is usually about the time that people do their interview for in the fall semester of their senior year, I usually recommend they go to an ROTC program about a month before then, and they learn as much as they can about the program and have their questions answered.
Right.
There's no problem with asking the question in the interview itself, but it makes it seem like you haven't really done your research, and so there's ample opportunity before the actual we would call job interview, right, or scholarship interview, to learn as much as you can about ROTC. To wait until the actual interview itself to start asking, questions, while that's not necessarily bad, I don't think it's the optimal way to go about this.
Got it. Okay, perfect. Now your story, West Point, I got to ask, when you were younger, did you know that was your pathway? Did you know that this is what you were going to be doing?
Yeah, that's a great question. I mean, I was in the same situation. Well, my dad was I'm 57 years old. So my dad was drafted in the Army, and he was, he just kind of did his 2 or 3 years of service and was, happy to move on with his life, sort of like a lot of draftees in the 50s and early 60s. So what happened with me was in middle school, I had a friend of mine, Dave Kowalski, who kept bugging me about joining this organization called Civil Air Patrol, which is kind of this high school program for that has, well, there's many things with Civil Air Patrol, but one of the things that they do is a cadet program. It's sort of one where it's like a young Air Force would be the best way to describe it. So I kept on pushing him off, and he kept on bugging me, and then I finally went and enjoyed it very much, and so that really changed kind of the trajectory of my life. And that then, I started being more inclined towards the military. And so there's many of these kind of military type organizations in high school, like, high schools have junior ROTC, obviously. There's also like, the Young Marines or Sea Cadets and Civil Air Patrol that gives you that kind of military propensity in high school, or that military experience in high school. It's not completely like the military, but it gives you that kind of introduction. And so that's what sort of got me interested and kind of sent me on my way to a military career.
Love it. I'm not sure. I'm curious if, some of the students that you help and the high school students that maybe you speak with, because I see it all the time. There's a lot of kids that don't know exactly what they want, and do you see that when, younger adults are interested in ROTC, interested in military, that it's something that they're extremely passionate about? Or do you think there's families out there, hey, you're going to be a doctor, you're going to be a lawyer, it's something gets pushed on them, and then it's trying to fit a square peg into a round hole sometimes. Do you find that with military service and, pursuing that is something that most students are ultimately passionate about? Or is it something that, even a conversation says, oh, I didn't know it was that. Now I'm interested, because I know that's one question I'm going to get into. But what do you ultimately see when people come to you for that assistance? Is it they're gung-ho, or somebody's pushing it on them, or what's that like?
Yeah. So it's sort of a combination of things that say that there's probably a certain percentage, I don't know exactly, let's say 50%, that develop the interest on their own for some reason, and the parents think that their kid just came from the planet, moved from the moon or another planet, and wonder what the heck, where did my kid come up with this, and so the parents oftentimes come to me and go, help, I have no idea about the military, I have no idea why my kid wants to do this, and so that's kind of 50% of them are like that, because they may have gotten the influence from the grandfather or things like that. The parents are supportive, but don't know anything about the military, or know very, very little about it. Then there's probably about another 25 to 30% where the parents are sort of pushing the student to do it. Maybe because of the scholarship benefit, maybe because they served. Things like that there may be that kind of, parental push, that, where the child is just not, maybe wasn't interested, but the parent pushed them. And so there's obviously degrees there where the kid's not interested at all and the parent's completely pushing it. Whereas on the other side, maybe the student's, interested in it and the parent provides that push. And then I think there's just that maybe 25% of people that are, that have always known that they want to do this. Maybe their parents did it. There's a lot of legacy in the military where you see, children of military people, or, maybe just a lot of students are joining the military. So you kind of have that percentage too. So I would say it's it's definitely a range, but it's interesting how many students are coming up with this on their own, which is just really, really interesting to me. Getting it from their grandparents, or just making a decision that this is something that they want to do.
Yeah. And again, where we're at today, I'm sure that if somebody does show interest, the internet is there to maybe shed some light and dispel some myths. And there might have been something someone assumed and it pushed them away. And then when they kind of overcome that hurdle, saying, "Oh, that's not what it is at all. Now I'm really interested," it might have taken away, the pushback may not have been a real fact. It may have been a myth that was just assumed. And when there was a little bit of research done, you kind of overcome that hump. I definitely think that with the availability of information today with social media, if you're following the right accounts, somebody might say something that definitely hits home and you say, "Man, that's the only reason I was thinking of not doing that." So a couple things from that, the parental push, and you mentioned, do this because you'll get a scholarship. How much of that is real? How much of that is a misunderstanding? When you talk about potential money for college, is it exactly, hey, if you do this, you get money? Or is that not quite understandable? Maybe parents giving this push, they're on the other side where they assume that it's a great thing, when in reality, it might not be everything that they thought it was. How does that exactly work?
Yeah, the scholarship is very valuable. The scholarship pays for full tuition at any public or private college or university. So, when I was at Claremont, McKenna, I was writing checks. Well, this was 10 years ago, for $60,000. Right now, they're probably writing checks for $75,000 a year. They get a stipend of over $400 a month for the 8 months they're in school, and then $1,200 a year for books. And then, places like Claremont, McKenna, interestingly, they because they support ROTC on campus, provide free room and board to the student if they are at Claremont, McKenna. So there's a number of schools out there that have room and board match. So, so you could be on a 4-year Army ROTC scholarship to Claremont, McKenna and have everything paid for. And so the student just has to serve 4 years in the Army in order to pay back that 4 years. So you can imagine, when a family that's, financially strapped has the opportunity to be able to have, a college such as, private college such as Claremont, McKenna paid for completely. You can imagine that the motivation that they might have to push their child to consider this option.
Yeah. Now, that's something that everyone gets, or is that a specific, you have to win the scholarship? Because I know that that's a question I get asked a lot.
Yeah, so you have to win the scholarship, but there's so when you apply out of high school, the scholarship is for 4 years. Actually, Army ROTC has a 3-year scholarship also that they offer out of high school, but most of the ROTCs are 4-year scholarships that start as soon as you get on campus in the fall of your freshman year. There's also if you don't get a scholarship out of high school, or you decide you want to do ROTC once you're in college, the ROTCs also have a scholarship program that would pay for your school once you join the program and show interest and participate. They have scholarships. They're called like on-campus scholarships, is for lack of a better term. And so those could be 3-year or 2-year scholarships that pay similar amounts as I talked about earlier.
Got it. So a couple pieces on the timeline then. If students are interested in this, you're applying for this senior year of high school. I get asked the question all the time, like, when should we start? If this is, the college journey, but if ROTC is another piece, another layer of something that has to be planned for, how soon do students need to start preparing for that to potentially earn these scholarships?
Right. Yeah. I mean, you make a great point there about the scholarship itself, because one thing that I tell parents is that the scholarship process is completely separate from college admission. So you're applying kind of parallel where, where where that process is happening at the same time. So generally, the way the timeline works is the application is an online application, and it generally opens up about at the end of the student's junior year, so around the June timeframe. Yeah. And so what you do is you fill out this this application, online application. You have to provide transcripts, maybe a few teacher recommendations, some essays, just similar to what a college application might look like. And then additional wrinkle is you have to do a physical fitness test, and that can normally be done with a phys ed teacher or a coach. That's done as part of the application. And then the final thing you do, which is usually in the fall of your senior year, a September, October timeframe, would be to interview at a ROTC program. So you can usually interview at one closest to where you live, or maybe at an ROTC program where you're interested in going to school at. And once you complete that interview, that's when you're looked at for a scholarship. So the earliest that you can be looked at for a scholarship is late October, and the earliest you can be informed is early November. But generally, the scholarship boards are on a rolling process, so you can be informed of a scholarship through the fall and into the spring of your senior year.
Wonderful. And as far as you mentioned, some schools, and may have a match for room and board. Mm-hmm. Obviously, I would say, there's part of what we try to help families with is find the right social fit, the right academic fit, the right financial fit school. And from a timing perspective, again, this is something that's layered, but depending on the outcome, could help with that potential financial fit. But there's also the understanding I got to find the right school with the right academic fit for me, the right social fit for me. So is it something that when you do a college visit, if this is, something you're going to layer, you're interested in, you applied in the summer and that these applications for the colleges are coming, is there anything that families need to be aware about, whether they're on a visit, what questions they should be asking? Should they be meeting with, is there an ROTC office at these schools, or where would they go to get a lot of their questions answered about the potential merger of those two, if those two worlds do come together? Say now we get our acceptances from school, we're in February or March, we know we got the scholarship, but how is there anything families should know about during that process?
Right. Yeah. So there's ROTC on most college and university campuses, particularly larger universities. Okay. When you start getting to, say, a place like Claremont, McKenna, which is a smaller college, all it has on campus is Army ROTC. Although you can do Army ROTC at, let's say, a university that's close by and go to Claremont, McKenna to do your training for ROTC. Okay. So let's just take Claremont, McKenna. There's a school nearby called Cal Poly Pomona, or California Polytechnic University Pomona. So you can actually do you could be a student at Cal Poly and then go to Claremont, McKenna for your training, for ROTC training. But for most colleges and universities, you can actually visit the ROTC program when you're on campus. And I strongly recommend that to candidates if they're visiting, say, UCLA. I'm looking at some of the schools behind you, Clemson, places like that. They have ROTC on campus, so you can certainly go visit the program. So all you have to do is just reach out to the ROTC program, just say you're interested in ROTC, and just as part of your campus visit, just visit that ROTC program and get to know it a little bit more. I would say the other thing that is very, very important for I think parents and students to understand about ROTC is that it is not all encompassing. So when you do ROTC at a college or university, it's around 7 hours a week of of things. So what you have is you normally have 3 to 3 hours of physical fitness training. That's in the morning time during the week. So a lot of students are sleeping and you're doing physical fitness in the morning. Yeah. So that's 3 of the 7 hours. And you might have a couple hours of class, just like a normal student would have. And then usually one afternoon a week, you have what's called laboratory, which is kind of a hands-on thing, similar to like a chemistry lab or something, but this is like a military lab. And so most of the training for ROTCs happen over the summertime. So there's a reason for that, because ROTC wants to make sure you do well at your college or university, because you cannot become an officer in the United States military without a bachelor degree. Mm-hmm. And so they want to make sure first that you're successful academically first, and so they generally don't put a tremendous amount of pressure on you, as far as hours go at the university, to make sure that you do well academically, and then move the significant military training to when you're not in school. Mm-hmm. So the point I'm making is that they say, well, what school should I go to? And my answer to them is, go to the school that is the best fit for you, as if you weren't even considering ROTC.
Right.
If Duke is your school and you love Duke, go to Duke, and then do ROTC there, but don't go to Duke because you visit the ROTC program and you love it, but you really want to go to UCLA instead.
Yeah. Gotcha.
Hopefully that makes sense.
Right. So another kind of question with that, does major matter? Mm-hmm. Does your college major have any effect on anything with ROTC?
Yeah, you're hitting all the high points here, which are really good. So yes, that to answer your question, for Navy and Air Force ROTC, the more technical branches of our military service, they favor those who do STEM majors. So if you engineering, hard science majors, you have a higher chance of getting a scholarship than the Army and Marine Corps. The Army and Marine Corps tend to not emphasize the major. So if you are a person who really isn't, a history major, I'm really interested in, putting yourself through 4 years of, chemistry or electrical engineering, and you don't particularly have a preference about what service you go into, the Army and Marine Corps are probably your better bets for ROTC. Compared to, say, Air Force or Navy.
Okay.
But yeah. So for example, you get a scholarship for Navy or Air Force ROTC, and you have your scholarship is for a STEM major, which is so the scholarship is tied to the major, tied to being a STEM major. So if you suddenly get to Duke and you've got a 4-year scholarship for Navy that is electrical engineering, and then you decide, well, I want to be an economics major, I don't like, I bombed out of calculus, then the scholarship is taken away from you.
Okay.
So you need to you need to make sure that you're ready to, do that. So when I talk to candidates and they, say to me, I look at their, when I consult with students, I get their SAT scores, I get their grades. And when I see, low SAT or ACT math scores with, math high school grades in the B, and they want to do engineering at some school, I say, we may want to shift our focus because you're a very good candidate of not succeeding in college at STEM major. So we have those kind of conversations with with candidates, talking to them about what the scholarship means and the ability to get through a STEM major in college.
Absolutely. And that we talk all the time that students have to they really have to know themselves. They have to know their strengths and weaknesses. And you don't want to put yourself in a position that you're essentially setting yourself up for failure. If it's not the area you're going to, really want to pursue, right? Because it's kind of a natural passion or a natural sign that if you do well in certain subject matters, it's because you probably enjoy it, right? It happens. It's rare to see somebody that truly dislikes a topic and continues to want to excel at that and get good grades in there. Usually when you see that, it's kind of like that you're not, the interest is not always peaked, which means you're not always retaining the information. When you're really into it and you're saying, I love this, the grades come. So, it's not even just about you might struggle, but it's also about knowing yourself, right? Pursuing those passions. You might not know what you want to do with the rest of your life, but kind of saying, I get good grades in here because it just comes natural to me. Well, it's probably also because you're doing things you don't even realize to support that. Things that you read in your free time, videos you watch, things that you want to educate yourself on just in free time correlates to those good grades and that passion. So definitely have to evaluate yourself and know your strengths and weaknesses, I'm sure, in any area, regardless if it's, just military service than ROTC that we're speaking of. So great piece of advice. I love that. I know that there's also a big question that parents typically always have, whether it's, a straight enlistment, whether it is ROTC, of the service. And I know that there's a lot of misconceptions because I know that when I was 18 years old, and because we've interviewed a few recruiters in the area from the different branches in past episodes, but to know that, hey, the 4 years after college, it's not infantry, because I know that is what most people will immediately think when they say, oh, ROTC, I have 4 years of service after college. Well, I don't know if I want to be infantry. Is that the case? Is it not? Is that a straight falsehood? Catch our listeners and myself up to speed to make sure we truly understand what that 4 years of service may be after college.
Thank you guys for being a part of College Knowledge, powered by Elite Collegiate Planning. If you didn't know, we have a free crash course on college funding at elitecollegiateplanning.com. This will explain different types of loans, types of financial aid, savings vehicles, and much more. And remember, plan early and pay less.
Right. So you commission as a second lieutenant or ensign in the military, right? So you are an officer, right? So you have a bachelor degree, you've gone through officer training, and you become an officer. So it's not an enlistment. So, an enlistment is where you maybe out of high school, you join the ranks of, say a sergeant or seaman in the Navy or an airman in the Air Force. So it's a different pathway. So there's a lot of specialties in the military other than infantry. So for the Navy, you have three primary types of specialties, which is surface warfare, which is on a ship, submarines, and then aviation. So those are kind of the three big areas of the Navy. The Army has 16 different branches or specialties of service, and only one of them is infantry. Like there's finance, military intelligence, logistics, things like that. But there, of course, is infantry and, armor, meaning tanks or field artillery, but there's also aviation, so you can fly helicopters. For the Air Force, you have obviously pilot, but you also have, many different occupational specialties in the Air Force too. The Marine Corps has infantry, but they also have other types of specialties within the Marine Corps where people don't go infantry. So there's very small number of people actually go like the infantry branch. Most of them are doing other things. So the way that you you get your branch specialty is you get ranked based on order of merit in your ROTC program. So that's usually about 40% or so would be your GPA, your grade point average. And then the other 60% would be your physical fitness and your performance in ROTC. And so based upon where you rank on your order of merit, you can choose what specialty you want to go into. And I can tell you, if you don't want to go into infantry, they're not going to force you into the infantry. If you actually, interestingly, for both the Marine Corps and the Army, infantry is actually very popular with students. So actually, it takes a little more to get into the infantry. So if you really don't want to go into the infantry and you want to be say, a field artillery officer or a logistics officer or something like that, it's fine because those might be a little less competitive. So they're not going to force the Army and other branches of service do not want to force you into a specialty you don't want to go into, because you're not going to be happy, and the soldiers, sailors, airmen, Marines that you're leading aren't going to be happy to have a leader who isn't happy to be there.
Yeah, very true. I know that's one that I do hear from parents a lot, right? It's, again, they have that assumption that this is what it's going to be like. So I'm always glad to hear, hey, if that's not what your kid wants to do, they're not going to force you to do that, right? And obviously, let's make some sense of that, right? If our military is not going to put somebody somewhere that they don't want to be because they're not going to be able to perform at the highest level. I mean,
right.
Yeah, so just common sense there. Like, let's put it together. We're not going to put somebody that, if you're not ready, if you're not willing and able, you think that they would put you there? Like, I think our military is a little pretty smart that they're going to say, yeah, we're just going to put the people that don't want to be there, they're going to win. What? That's not going to happen.
Yeah. So let me pile on that one for a second. So officership is different than enlisting, okay?
Mhm.
Because you're leading America's soldiers, sailors, airmen, Marines. The parents of people who enlist, of their children who enlist, do not want their children to be led by somebody who doesn't want to be there. So,
Sure.
for example, if you take the ROTC scholarship, you make a decision later on in your time in college that I don't want to do this anymore, then the military will say to you, fine, leave, but you'll have to pay back your scholarship. But we don't want, particularly with officers, we don't want people in the military who don't want to be there, because the soldiers, sailors, airmen, Marines that enlisted don't deserve you.
Yeah, so true. And I mean, whether it's the military or not, think about anyone who leads anyone in any position in work. If your boss, whatever, it doesn't want to be there, is that you probably won't want to work there. Right. I mean,
Right.
it's a simple concept. If they're passionate and they want the best for you, and they're going to put you in the best position and amplify your strengths and make sure your weaknesses don't affect anything, that is a true leader. And that person would love to be doing that job. It would show day in, day out. And so I'm sure that is exactly what you're hitting on, we want to find those people and mold them to become those great leaders for everyone else. It's fantastic. And the fact that you're helping not just mold, but helping find those students and guide them through this whole process to really, again, better our country is a wonderful, wonderful feat that you're doing. And, very, very grateful that is the position that you have in your service. Thank you for everything that you have done and continue to do. It's wonderful to hear. I would ask also, again, I bring up that assumption, but is there anything that you typically see? Is there any, I don't want to call them myths, but is there anything that is greatly overlooked or just misunderstood when people think about, the service, the program, the ROTC, that families that I may not have even thought about yet today that they need to know, or maybe that they're always thinking, and you can dispel that for us?
Right. Yeah. So I'll address kind of two things there. Maybe your question about the misconceptions, and then second is that the things that you really need to concentrate on to win one of these scholarships.
Okay,
so let me talk first about the misconceptions. I think the first misconception is that like I mentioned earlier, ROTC is all encompassing, right? Mm-hmm. Is that it's you go in college, university, and you're just going to be doing military stuff all the time. Say that's a first thing, and I've already sort of dispelled that myth a little bit. Second would be that that going to a military academy is better than ROTC, and that ROTC is a second-rate way to become an officer. And I can tell you that most of our officers in the military come from ROTC. They don't come from a service academy, and mm-hmm. we produce fantastic officers out of ROTC. And so it's not a second-rate commissioning source. It is a source where we rely on for the majority of our officers that serve in the military, not a place like West Point or the Air Force Academy. And then I think the third is just what we talked about there, is that it's a privilege and an honor to lead America's soldiers, sailors, airmen, Marines, yeah. And that we're picky. We're not going to accept everybody, and it's not. Mm-hmm. We're not desperate for officers. We prefer not to have an officer in a formation that doesn't want to be there, and let a senior enlisted person lead that formation rather than an officer. So we want people who want to be there, particularly for all of our ranks, but particularly for officers. So let me just transition a little bit to kind of how to get one of these scholarships. And yeah. We have acronyms in the military. There's all those acronyms, that we have. I'm sure there's some in the college, admissions space.
There's a few. Yep. There's a few. Yep.
So the one that I want people to burn into their minds is SAL, SAL, like, scholar, athlete, leader is really what we're looking for ROTC. So let me just, kind of define each one and kind of just in general what ROTCs are looking for, and kind of emphasize the important things. Scholar, SAT or ACT. The ROTCs are not coming off the SAT or ACT. It's about somewhere around 40% of the overall evaluation. So I know a lot of colleges are going away from it. the biggest mistake you can make is de-emphasizing that SAT or ACT. So you got to take that test, and you got to continue to take that test to try to score as high as you can. So your goal is, it depends on the scholarship, but obviously the higher you can get, the better. 1,200, actually 1,300 or higher can get you, into the ballpark of one of really those top scholarships. 1,300 or somewhere around a 30 ACT or higher can get you the composite. Most ROTC super score their tests. So, and then your high school grades and college prep, just like a regular college or university looks at. So grades, your rigor of your college curriculum, of your high school curriculum for college prep, and SAT or ACT, but emphasis on the SAT or ACT. Athlete, defined as two ways: participation in team sports or sports in your high school or outside of high school, particularly emphasis of where you're a good teammate. The military believes that being in sports and being a teammate instills life lessons in you that you cannot learn anyplace else. So if you can do something athletic in high school and be a part of a team, you definitely want to move in that direction. And then doing well in the physical fitness test. So there's a test that I mentioned that you have to do. It usually consists of push-ups, curl up or a plank, and a run. So the better you can score in that test, that also proves your athletics. And then finally, leadership. So the ROTC programs want to bring people in who have already demonstrated leadership in high school. They don't want to, develop somebody from the ground up. So the more chances that you've had to lead your peers, in particular in tasks, the better you're going to score and the better you're going to be looked at. So, things inside of school like student council, school offices, presidents or leaders of clubs in school. Outside of school, things like scouting, I mentioned Civil Air Patrol and places like that, but all the different types of organizations outside of school where you can demonstrate leadership. So the point is that you want to show the people that are looking at your application that you have led others in projects or goals. And you can imagine that during the interview itself, they're going to be asking those questions of you. So a typical question you might get in an interview would be, by the time you've led others in a project or goal, what was that goal? How did you lead others? What happened? And what did you learn from it? Might be a good answer. So you need to be able to talk about that for about 3 minutes. Yeah. Talk about, say, a good boilerplate example of that would be like your Eagle Scout project. If you're, an Eagle Scout, would be, talking about that from start to finish. But, it can be any sorts of, leadership that you've done, but you need to demonstrate that, that you've effectively led others. And because what ROTC will do is take that base of leadership that you have and make it even better. So again, scholar, athlete, leader. And then I would say the final thing that is outside of the control, but we definitely need to mention here is medical qualification. All right. So you can't go into the military if you have a significant medical issue. And you'd be surprised at how many people cannot serve in the military because they have some medical issue. And some of the medical issues would be like things like asthma, significant allergies, to like say food allergies or something like that. Significant mental health issues can also be disqualifying. Any physical impairments, that preclude you from being able to serve can be disqualifying. So when you when you're going through this process, you have to clear the medical. Yeah. And so there's waivers that the military can give. For example, if you're taking antidepressants or you're taking ADHD medication or you're maybe on a 504 plan or an IEP, you may be able to get a waiver for that, but the services might be able to give you a waiver for that. But they want people who are medically, obviously they need, it's required to be medically qualified. And so even things like being overweight, you got to meet a height weight standard too. So there's all sorts of things that disqualify people from serving in the military. And a lot of our health issues these days that young people are dealing with have affected the ability of people to serve in the military. So that's just the other thing I think that people need to be aware of is that medical clearance also.
Yeah. I was one question on that. Is color blindness something that could disqualify you if you're colorblind?
Yeah, you can't serve in the Navy and be colorblind.
Okay. I remember seeing that.
But other services you can.
Okay.
But the Navy, I think it's Navy officers, but I think you can serve as an enlisted in the Navy being colorblind. But for officers, you have to pass. I think it has to do with just service on the ocean.
Got it.
So it's like I'll have some candidates come to me and say, well, why can't I serve if I have a peanut allergy, for example? Where I would go into shock if I have a peanut allergy. Say, why can't I just serve on a ship where they just have me avoid peanuts? And I say, well, you could be deployed to even if you're in the Navy or the Air Force, you could be deployed to very remote locations. And the military is not very good at managing eaches. They're very good at they want to deploy people to places and not worry about that that one particular person has a peanut allergy and that we need to avoid peanuts with this person. Yeah. So there's a lot of austere environments where they cannot they can't be concerned that you're going to need medical assistance because of some allergy. The other thing is your soldiers, sailors, airmen, Marines don't deserve. They have to rely on you as their officer, and so they can't be concerned that their officer is going to go down because they have some sort of medical condition they didn't disclose, or I'll get a question like, well, why can't my child get additional time on tests? What's wrong with that? I said, well, is the enemy going to allow you additional time to when they're coming after you? So it's I think sometimes there's this misunderstanding with why the military has the medical standards it does, and it has to do with being able to execute the specific missions that the military has, and you got to have people who are healthy, and able to function at a full level, I should say.
I could probably talk to you pretty candidly about this topic for another hour, to be honest with you, right? I mean, it's something that, to me, that is common sense. And I get into the ability to critically think, and you look at different things over time. The needing more time on a test, right? Something that I have seen, and we've seen numbers, is over these past years, high school GPAs have been rising. GPAs are higher than they've ever been, but our standardized test scores are as low as they've ever been. And I think a lot of that is the catering, right? I think part of that is the restrictions on what a teacher may have for a student is more lenient. And it puts them in a position to get a great GPA. You have a standardized test, and meanwhile, some people can get more, time with those still. But when you have something that everyone takes and it's not catered, now you start to see where true results come out, which is why the SAT you mentioned, like, it's as much as it went away, it's coming back. Right. It is something that experiment, a lot of schools saw that it failed when they didn't use an SAT. And there are guidelines that you need to understand that you can't change the guideline. If you need to change the guideline, that is not the right place for you to be. Right. And that's where I kind of always say, for students, like when you go to a school, you can't go there and say, oh, I don't like this. I'll get the school to change for me. You have to say that's not the right place for me, right? Like, and just it's a valuable lesson, not just in the military, to understand that not everything is going to, and that's life. I mean, that you can't essentially say, hey, I'm the new employee at the office and this is my standard and everyone now has to abide by my rules.
Right.
Well, right. Like, if you imagine saying that on the interview, I'll come and work here if you meet my demands. Like, let's be honest, it's not going to And when you talk about the military, there's so much that would be amplified with that. Like you said, the actual piece, like, do you really think that someone who is against us would cater? Like, it's you have to think about some things
Yeah.
critically, make sure it is sometimes I think it's common sense, but you bring up a good point. Um, I know we're running out of time, but I do want to hit on two other questions. One I think is pretty quick on the front end, and one maybe a little bit longer on the back end. But with the different branches and the different ROTC, the Navy, Air Force, Army, Marines, what is it something that you only apply to one? Can you apply to multiple? When you're looking to pursue this, if you're thinking it's the right, is it more you do your research and you only apply to one? But I'm sure that's a question that some people will have in this as well.
Right. Yeah. So you can apply to all of them at the same time if you want to. So the Navy, you can either apply for Navy or Marine Corps. So Navy ROTC is the Marine Corps is kind of folded out underneath the Navy. So you choose one or the other. And I failed to mention Space Force, but Space Force is sort of rolled under Air Force. So you can apply for Space Force under Air Force. So you can actually apply to the big three, which would be Navy, Air Force, and Army at the same time. So obviously you're going to have to do 3 different interviews. You're going to have to do all that. But yeah, it's very common to have people apply for multiple ROTC scholarships, and then also they're probably a number of them are also applying to the service academies too. So there's also the separate application process for the military service academies. But yeah, you can apply to multiple ROTCs. Yes.
Now, is that looked at something that is, I know it may sound odd, but is that looked at as, hey, if I'm interviewing for all 3, and you're interviewing with somebody from the Army, will they be aware, number one, that you're applying to the other 2? And then does that look as, is it a positive in that, hey, this is a great candidate and we want to make sure that we give you this offer so you don't go somewhere else, kind of like the college aspect? Or is it, you're not that serious about us because you're also interviewing with those, the other guys over there? How is that looked at as a positive or negative?
Yeah. So actually the ROTCs don't know you're applying to the other ROTCs. So they're not, even though we all fall under the Department of Defense, the Army doesn't know what the Navy's doing. Navy doesn't know what the Air Force is doing. It's kind of disjointed in that regard. So as long as you've got good knowledge of the service that you want to apply to, and you have good, as long as you don't say like, I want to be an infantry officer, and you're in the and you're applying for the Air Force scholarship, you should be fine. You should be able to apply for multiple ROTCs and be fine.
Love it. The last question that I have for the day, because I'm going to, I think, wrap all this up is in a nice little package. But after 4 years of service, careers, would imagine that finding a job, whether it's, inside the military after 4 years, outside the military, again, I would imagine that the chances are pretty high that you're going to have employment. What is it? I mean, and I would imagine almost the possibilities are endless, but as far as the career side on the back end, what does this do for people that do go through the process?
Yeah, they have an acronym for that the corporations use. It's called JMO, Junior Military Officer. So when you get out after 4 years, if you decide to do that, obviously, if you're doing good as an officer, we'd love you to stay in and continue doing what you're doing in service. But if you decide to get out after your service time, usually 4 years or 5 years, corporations love you because you've demonstrated leadership in the service. You've led others effectively as an officer. And so corporations want leaders. They want people who, kind of have that experience. So there's many companies that and actually specialized recruitment agencies that cater to junior military officers. And usually when a junior military officer leaves service, they're not hurting to try to find a job.
Yeah. So I say I kind of wrap this up in that while it may be some extra effort, right, and it's not something that's necessarily parallel to the college process, but something that gets layered on top. And there is, I would say, more work that has to be done. But look, if this is something that you want to do, I even say that people from the college perspective, there's a lot of work and research that you have to do. It's how you win the game, is being prepared. But if this is something that you're truly passionate about, it, without a doubt, I think we hit on, you win one of these scholarships and you stick with it, it takes care of the financial side. And if you're willing to do the work and the research and nail the interview and be educated, and you're doing the same thing with your college choice, you are essentially hitting that the financial piece is taken care of. You're finding the school that's the right academic fit. You found the school that's the right social fit. You got 4 years of service. And after that, most likely it's not going to be that hard to find a job. And I think that most people would say that the goal of going to college is to get educated and get a career that I'm going to be passionate about for the rest of my life. And hopefully I can do it in a way that I'm not in a mountain of debt, that I can't start my families. I can't get married. I can't buy a house until I'm 35 or 40 years old. I think that's a big fear that families have right now. And this is a very straight opportunity to work this in that can take care of a lot of potential. Do I have a career? Can I get a job? And am I going to be in debt? It kind of does a lot for families for families and for students, but young candidates that this is for. If you are slightly interested in this, I would highly recommend, if not anything else, do a little bit of research to see if this is something that you would like to pursue. With that, if there are students that listen to this episode, I know you mentioned you do some consulting. Is it something that's still private? Is it something that you want people to know a website, a contact information, reach out to you? How can people touch base with you?
Yeah, just quickly about what you just said. If you got you graduate from college at 22, 4 years in the service, you're 26 years old. I'm 57 years old. 26. Geez, you're got your whole life ahead of you. So, it's not that much time in your life when you consider that. So, but regarding my consulting services, you can, find me at rotcconsulting.com. And we have a bunch of resources, blog posts and things like that, courses, online courses you can take, as well as consulting that we can provide. We also have a sister site called gainserviceacademyadmission.com that helps you with Service Academy. So we have a ton of resources. Just go to those two sites and you'll learn a lot about the processes for both.
Absolutely love it. I'll be making sure that anytime I have a meeting that this comes up in conversation, that these are two websites and links that I'm going to be sharing. Our listeners, if you are interested in this, Brewines, I have that link. I'm sure that Niall will make sure we have these links updated on all of our social media platforms when we have this video. So click the link below to find out more. But that was one other thing I was going to say there, and I already lost it. Sometimes I have these random. I got so much going on inside, but. No, it truly is wonderful what you're doing. Thank you for, again, thank you for your service, but thank you again for what you're doing to prep these young minds and really meld them to become future leaders. It truly is wonderful what you're doing. And thank you so much for being on the show. I enjoyed every minute of it. I think the only thing I didn't get into today was I was a little curious about what the physical fitness requirements are to maybe give myself a goal. I'm trying to get back in shape. So, hey, I can pass the test, but we won't get into that. As long as there's no pull-ups right now, I'm good. So, but Lieutenant Colonel Rob Kirkland, this has been absolutely so informative, amazing. I have learned a ton today, and I know if I learn something and find this amount of time valuable, I know our listeners should be getting even more out of it. So it is greatly appreciated. Thank you so much for being on the show. I would love to potentially even check in with you again in the future. My co-host, Dave Kozak, I know would love to dive into some of these things. I'm sure if he was here, we would have had 45 minutes on, people complaining about a peanut allergy, but we won't get into that. But thank you so much for doing, as we sign off, any last words that you'd like to have before we say farewell today?
Oh, I think you summed it up great, and it was a pleasure to be here.
Yeah, thank you so much. Everyone, if you like this episode, if you have any friends, family that are interested in the potential service, if they're interested in ROTC, make sure that you're sharing this episode. Make sure you're sharing the links that the Lieutenant Colonel mentioned. We'll make sure that they're on all of our details and titles and everything on wherever this gets shared. But definitely this is an episode worth sharing with anyone who will have the slightest inclination that maybe this is the right pathway for them. So until next time, we will see you later on another episode of College Knowledge in the future. Until then, take care.
If you didn't know, we're on Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, and LinkedIn at Elite Collegiate Planning. Make sure to share and tag us.